Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the committee, issued this statement. At the 11th hour, Mr. Clark has agreed to appear before our committee once again, this time to assert a Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. If Mr. Clark makes the assertion that answering particular questions about the scheme to overturn the election would tend to incriminate him, that is a weighty matter, and the committee will soberly assess whether that privilege has been properly invoked. And joining us now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he's a member of the January 6th Select Committee. Congressman Schiff, the Fifth Amendment, invoking the Fifth Amendment means that you personally believe, as you invoke it, that you did commit or may have committed a crime. And answering this question might bring you closer to prosecution and conviction for committing that crime. But people sometimes hide behind the Fifth Amendment when they really aren't likely to be self-incriminating. How does a congressional committee determine whether the Fifth Amendment's being properly invoked?
Well, it's a good question, Lawrence. And just to give some of the chronology here, for weeks we tried to get Mr. Clark to come before the committee. Ultimately, we were forced to subpoena him. We then brought him before the committee. He refused to answer pertinent questions, and he gave a wide-ranging, a set of excuses, assertions of different purported privileges, not the Fifth Amendment, however, which didn't seem to have a good faith basis. And it wasn't sufficient to merely show up and say, I'm not going to answer any questions without being willing to state, okay, what is the particular privilege you're asserting? For example, Lawrence, I asked him about a conversation he had with a reporter about January 6th. There was no conceivable privilege covering a conversation he had with the press, but he still refused to answer questions about it. Now he is asserting at the 11th hour, when he was going to be held in contempt, a Fifth Amendment privilege. Now, that Fifth Amendment doesn't apply if what he's really trying to do is not protect himself from incrimination, but protect Donald Trump from incrimination. And in terms of how the committee will ascertain whether he's invoking that in good faith, we will have to assess that when he comes and testifies, whether he is invoking the Fifth in a wholesale manner as to matters that there cannot be a factual basis for that claim, or whether he is invoking it in good faith. We take the Fifth Amendment very seriously, but we're going to have to assess it after his testimony.
Well, let's, for the moment, assume he's invoking the Fifth Amendment in good faith, which is to say he's invoking it because he believes he committed a crime. Doesn't that suggest that Merrick Garland's Justice Department should be all the more urgently criminally investigating what Jeffrey Clark was up to and who he was up to who was with him and what he was up to?
Well, Lawrence, here I want to be careful about my answer to your question. I don't want it to be a basis for him to make any claim at his deposition on Saturday. But I will say generally that I think that the Justice Department ought to be investigating, for example, as I've said, the former president's actions in trying to overturn the election in Georgia. In particular, his call with the Secretary of State, where he had asked Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes that don't exist. Any effort to overturn a lawful election, as we appear to have witnessed with Donald Trump, ought to be investigated. I don't want to talk more specifically about Mr. Clark, but I will say, according to his lawyer, at the 11th hour, he is making an assertion he did not make when he appeared before our committee only weeks ago, that he believes his answers, at least to some questions, might incriminate him. Now, the questions that are most pertinent here are ones that go to efforts to get Georgia to withhold the slate of electors, or maybe send a slate that doesn't represent what the voters in that state decided, as well as what an effort to similarly have other states withhold their electors as well.
It would seem that the Justice Department, now headed by Merrick Garland, has a special responsibility to hold Jeffrey Clark accountable and accountable to the committee's demands. Otherwise, the Justice Department then starts to appear to be basically helping a former Justice Department official slowly get away with whatever he was trying to get away with.
Well, I think you're right, Lawrence, and we should consider the fact, too, that Jeffrey Clark's superiors at the Justice Department have already come in and testified. So in terms of any claim of privilege, executive privilege, the fact that those even above him, high in higher positions, did not assert any privilege is pretty telling when someone at a lower level is trying to claim that. They also didn't assert any Fifth Amendment privilege. Now, Mr. Clark may have a particular reason why he believes that his testimony would incriminate him. And again, we'll have to evaluate that as it comes. But should we decide that it is a valid invocation of privilege as to certain questions, even then, that might not be the end of the story. We could explore potentially with the Justice Department whether there is in order some form of immunity. But I don't want to, cross that bridge before we see whether this invocation is in good faith or in bad faith. So far, I think in his prior appearance before the committee, he was not acting in good faith.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence.